So we will have what we call constant and what we call variable, right? And that's kind of like, you don't have to think of it outside of regular English. Constant is a number that won't change, right? And variable is usually represented by a letter and can be replaced by numbers, right? So the X, the Y's, the Z's, the T's, the N's are what we call variable. Is that okay? Everybody with me? And so the question is the numbers. The numbers. Here we are going to see they can be integers, fractions, and real, what we call real numbers. Integers are what we know as integers. I hope most of you know it's like the -12 maybe, or -11 for negative 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So numbers you get by adding or subtracting 1, just a unit, right? So that's called like a whole number, what we call integers. Is that okay? And then fractions are integers divided by integers, as long as you are not dividing by 0. So that's a really strong thing, not dividing by 0. Yeah. So you could have 2 divided by 4. This slash is sometimes how we represent division as well. Yeah. Or you get that dot bar dot thing. 2 divided by 4, or 3 divided by 17, or a -1 divided by 5, or even 100 divided by 50. So remember, notice that all integers are fractions, right? Because we can do 2 divided by 1, 5 divided by 1, which is 5. So any integer divided by 1, so 1 is an integer, so we can express an integer as a fraction as well, but we don't usually do that. That's just a note. So the fractions include the integers, but they include much more. They include the numbers that are not whole. Is that okay? Like 3a's, 13 divided by 11, things like that. And then we have the real numbers. The real numbers are all the other numbers plus the fractions. So we are going to have numbers that cannot be expressed as an integer divided by another integer. And those are considered all the real numbers. So in some sense, when you want to see it as a picture, for those of you who like pictures better, it's like, let's do like a line that represents, you know, those checkered notebooks that we have for math calculation, right? They usually have like these units that we can label 1, 2, 3, 4. And then here we can label -1, -2, like that. So these, I just wrote down the integers. And then I can start trying to draw the fractions, like every place that's a half, or a 1/3, or a 1/5, I'll start having other dots that represent the fractions. What people notice is that once you do put all the fractions, there will just be some other holes on this line. And those holes are going to be the real numbers that are not fractions, the irrational numbers. Yeah, those are called the numbers that fractions are also called rational numbers. And numbers that are not fractions are called irrational. I'll type all this up later and then share. Yeah, this is just for now. And then when we talk about factoring, what does factoring mean? Factoring means breaking down multiplication into its smaller parts. And there will be a point that you cannot break down anymore. Yeah, I don't want to go into detail right now, but if you imagine like 4 is 2 times 2. And then 2 is just 2 times 1. You know, you can't break down 2 anymore. You don't break down into fractions like that, right? You can't say, oh, 2 is like 4 times half or something. You don't do that. So once you have 4 is 2 times 2, this is it. You already, like, that's the minimum terms you have. 6 is 2 times 3. You know, 27 is 3 times 9, but 9 is 3 times 3. So I could factor out 27 into 3 times 3 times 3. And then after that, I'm done. So this is what we call like factoring a number into prime numbers. Yeah. So if you want to check, because we are not going to use the prime numbers so much, but if they ever mention prime numbers are integers that can only be divided by themselves or by the number 1. And when you have a huge number and you break it down into a multiplication of only prime numbers, you know that's it. You can't, yeah. It's like items of clothing, right? Like you dress up and then you have all these items of clothing, so you can still break down your entire attire into 5 pieces of clothing. But then once you have to start rip them apart, then you know you can't break down anymore. This is it. This is like the smallest unit, like, of number, something like that. I don't know if that was helpful or it made it worse. Maybe, I don't know. Sorry.
I think it's helpful to me. I know Danielle and Allison were the people that asked the questions. Are there other questions about this?
The definitions help a lot. Thank you.
They do help a lot.
I just mentioned the numbers, right? So when you think polynomials, what are polynomials? Now polynomials are like they start using numbers and multiply by a variable, usually x, and start writing an expression. An expression with numbers multiplying powers of x is called a polynomial. And the same idea works. When they call factoring a polynomial, it means you break it down into smaller polynomials. And what they mean by smaller polynomials is the power of x is smaller. And then if you break down at a certain point, you're not going to be able to break it down anymore. And then that's it, you've finished factoring. Yeah, but we'll see factoring in more detail, I think, in the next session, maybe. Yeah. Right now, it's just working on definitions and multiplying them. Multiplying is always easier than factoring, actually. So I think factoring, if you know the distributive, what they call distributive property, this is something that I have in my slide though. So I will probably want to go back to that because it was a very important multiplication rule that sometimes people forget.